Hey Peter, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Nikos.
What have you been up to?
Oh, all sorts of things. Traveled around the world doing working for a gold mine. Had some time off with COVID. Um, Played some music. I'm now working for Gina Miller's True and Fair Party in politics, trying to disrupt politics, which is like sort of a jam session, really. So since we're talking about music, it's all related to music, but this is a new venture for me of dealing with politicians who aren't susceptible to logic and scales.
So, since we last talked, we've had about, I think, 3 more years of Brexit. How are things going in the UK right now, according to your opinion?
Well, I was going to smile and say they're going extremely badly. I'm not really happy about that, but they are going extremely badly. I mean, the music industry is crumbling. I've just seen a thing today about that where people are saying we have to have an exception for the music industry. And although that clearly is a burning platform, we need an exception for everyone and to get rid of Brexit because it's now starting to reveal its many ugly heads economically, socially, politically, constitutionally, you name it. There's not really, it touches everything. This is not like an economic change or a social change. It crosses all of those areas. And the musicians, the number one musician has just said that without help, the UK music industry will crumble. I think that's a little dramatic because the one thing we do have around the world is the English language. Uh, that's both in literature and, of course, in music. But of course, without the industries to support it, you don't necessarily, you can't, if you can't travel and play in European countries easily, uh, you can see why bands will struggle with that. But all over, it's going extremely badly, and it's now being recognised by even the people that voted for it that it's a mess. Whether we can, what they don't recognise is that we could do a thing called join anew or rejoin or whatever you want to call it. No, people haven't realised that it's possible to do that because they think we've made our decision and we've made our bed. But of course, it is possible, and it's not easy, but it's possible. So that's the next step, really. But nearly everyone that voted for it is now realizing we were sold a pup.
So, what is it about Brexit that's especially bad for musicians?
Oh, carnets, travel permits, getting your equipment across the world. It's rather like traveling to any third country now to go to Europe, where obviously our nearest market is Europe. So if you go to France, you probably have to borrow your equipment in France. And there have been a lot of places set up now to do that very thing. So if you want PA, amps, guitars, everything, there is someone in Belgium waiting to give you that and charge you for the pleasure. Of course, your margin goes down and down and down. If you take t-shirts, you've got to pay VAT on them. So nobody takes merchandise because it's too much hassle. Lots of things, but there's a few to be going on with.
So, if you're bringing your instruments with you, are they charging import taxes on that, even though you already own it and you're just bringing it into the country temporarily?
I think they're charging some. I'm not sure it's an import tax, but there are taxes and hassle. Um, I haven't done it because if I go abroad with my Academy of Rock, what I'm used to doing is just clicking my fingers and buying the equipment for the client there. So it really doesn't affect me because I've been used to doing corporate work where it's much easier just to get someone on the other side to get your kit. But if you're working on low margins, that really hurts. And if you want to take your special instrument, it's real lots of trouble. I know lots of young bands that now just buy the whole lot and take the hit on their margin because they like traveling. But there's no money to be made out of it like that. It's all right if you're Britney Spears because you can carry all that and you can get someone to do the VAT on your t-shirts and everything. But if you're starting out, it's a bit of a deal breaker, really.
So, is there not enough money in the UK so that you just do your live performances here and make money from touring UK
Of,
venues?
of course, there is money in the to be made in every market. Of course, a lot of bands, if they want to break through on the world stage, feel they have to travel to Berlin, Brussels, and Paris and other places. And so, we may return to the folk industry. So we'll all be playing lutes, I think, in Britain.
I
So
saw a video of yours there. It was like you're in a room full of businessmen in suits, and you're playing Prince again. You know, uh, what's it called, Purple Rain. So, what was the
yeah,
reaction to, like? Because normally you go to conferences and there's no live performances. It's all just sitting watching people give PowerPoint presentations and those kind of things. What's the reaction to you sitting down and playing, standing up and playing a full solo like that?
well, to be
And
fair, you haven't seen the warm up. So during the day, I had been talking about parallel lessons from music and business, and I had done some demonstrations, had some people come and try and play some simple music with me, some 12-bar music, sort of simple music, really, just to sort of jam along with me. And we were talking about improvisation and how improvisation in music could be crossed over into creativity in business, and the same principles were sort of involved. So we'd had a bit of a warm up that, but this was in the evening, so you have permission, I think, to do something different most of the time. And they went to an evening session, and two things were different. A, it was the evening. B, they'd had drinks. So, yeah, not too many drinks, but enough to think, well, we want to be entertained. So you have permission to do that, I think, in that sort of environment. If I'd have done that in the daytime, the lighting would have been wrong for one reason, and it wouldn't have been the expectation to have just played to them, at them, with them. Whereas in the evening, they were expecting me to play a song, and I'd arranged it with the people, and they knew it was going to happen. Of course, it actually is all about expectation management. If people expect you to, jump through a hoop, then it's no surprise when you do. And in this case, it was absolutely fine. They went absolutely mad, which isn't on the camera, but they were very appreciative. I still talk to people from that event who still remember it, and it was just the one song, and it built a lot of bridges. So that was, I think, 2015, the thing you saw. I still talk to those people nearly 10 years after. So that's quite incredible. I don't always talk to people who've had my management consulting so long after, although that does happen as well. But no, music cuts through in ways that spreadsheets don't. So no, and I was pretty good that evening, I have to say. there
yeah,
weren't there weren't too many mistakes.
yeah, I didn't
But
actually recognize any mistakes in that performance. Actually,
oh, the trick in jazz is if you do something that's a bit weird, keep doing it. Do it 3 times, and people go, "Oh, now he's onto something." I think I learned that from Richie Blackmore as well. But yeah, there are no mistakes. There are just notes you didn't quite intend to put in that place on at that time. So there's a couple of ones I'd have rather not done, but they're not exactly wrong. They're just I thought afterwards there was something more elegant I could have done, but I just made it up really, uh, based on some nod to Prince because it was in the style of Prince, but in my style. I don't ever like to just do straight copies. I have my own style, but it had a bit of a nod to the man. God rest his soul.
indeed. So I thought I'd go out on a bit on a limb today because last time you gave a live performance. So what I've
Mhm.
done here is, if you have the desire, I can play a backing track and I can improvise on top of it on my acoustic guitar for like a couple of minutes, and you can give me some feedback.
Please do.
Okay, so here's the backing track. It's an A minor, and
One of the sad chords.
I've got an acoustic here. So hopefully you can hear them both at the same time, and I'll just jam along with it.
They're phasing a little bit, but they're okay. We're okay.
All right, cool. So I'm just trying to think. I'm going to put the mic a bit further away from my head so you can probably hear both instruments, or the Mac. This is an instrument, the iPad, and my small guitar. I mean, ideally, I should have like had some system to connect all that stuff up to, but I'm not that organized yet. It's
It's
a
fine.
hobby, you know.
It's fine.
All right, here we go. Can't even see the notes properly, but can you hear that? Okay.
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
here we go. All right.
For the live recording, Nikos, you might have to do that piece, record it on because I'm listening to it and I'm getting a tiny bit of the track and most of your guitar, but it's blowing it's compressing itself out
Yeah, I got
and
you.
then
Got you.
dropping out. So you might find when you play this back that you might have to record an insert into it. But I got all the guitar and some of the backing, and I figured out what the backing notes were from what you were playing.
Okay,
So
cool, cool.
I think I almost learned it.
Probably the first live performance I ever did over the internet. So,
Well, yeah, first time for everything. Well, what do you want to know about it?
well, I, what I'm finding is that with improvisation,
Hmm.
I would say the past 95% of what I've done in the past, it's all about trying to get the right notes. But then
Yeah,
as I play more of it, I'm sort of imagining what I want to play. That's kind of, I'm getting there gradually.
yeah. I mean, I got several flavors from it. Santana came through strongly
Oh,
for me.
come
Uh,
on.
Carlos, Carlos Santana came through as the first influence that sort of spoke to me. Um, and of course, you were working in a very sort of an A minor scale with a sort of improvised feel around a sort of blues, well, sort of various different blues scales, diminished scales of the blues, and the sort of the sixth interval, and then the sort of the other one. So it was a nice mixture of pure blues with some sort of other scales. I don't read music, I should point this out, but I kind of hear them.
I think the diminish
But
was a
you
mistake,
sort
though.
there was a thing I think you probably didn't mean to do, but
Yeah.
I would write home about it. So that was one of those, but there's always one. Um, uh, but you were talking about improvisation and things you didn't may not have meant to do or did do. But I particularly like the use of the sixth interval, and there was quite not one or two nice bits of slurring. And on an acoustic guitar, it's really hard to slur the top note, one semitone up. But then you did that first, third, fourth, and then the augmented fourth, the sixth interval thing a few times. And I like that. And you sort of bent it up towards the fifth, as
It's
it
really
were.
hard to do that on an acoustic. You've got an electric in
Everything,
Scotland.
everything is hard on an acoustic, particularly with nylon strings.
Yeah.
Yeah, that made it hard. But I really liked the fact that you weren't constrained by anything. And I'd encourage you just to sort of uh, take what I said earlier and think, well, if it doesn't quite work, if you end up with a ninth, just bend it up a bit and sort of it makes the note right then. So I find if I hit a wrong note, I just bend them, and then sooner or later you think, yes, that was good.
Yeah, I'm trying to work. So you've got a root note of the scale. You've got like a A.
Mm.
I'm trying to get to the point where, like, so I play this A on the third string here, right?
Yeah.
I want to get to the point where I can like not have to think too much to be able to play anywhere within like this range, up and down, like to know exactly what it'll sound like. And then
Mm.
obviously these all repeat against the various.
Cool.
There's
Yeah.
like the A down here, which I quite like a lot. Um, and then I want to start learning, like practicing. I've got the blues scale down. That's pretty simple. I mean,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
uh, but then I want to try and like incorporating some of the modes, like the Dorian and the Perkin mode. But then it's just a memory exercise, and then I find that I'm kind of constrained to like an octave of like the Perkin or the Dorian because that shape is like I'm not so comfortable with it around the various parts of the neck.
Well, I have to say that is down to sheer repetition and or just experimentation, really. And so, and the thing I never was good at doing is just going like piano players, just going up and down the scale all day and learning the things. I got really bored with that.
Yeah,
Uh, of course,
totally.
had I been bored with that, I'd have been better than I am. So I suppose some of it is practice of just learning the going around the mouse wheel enough times so it becomes automatic. But also it's then say mixing between different scales. So I like to use the blues scale and the major scale interchangeably from time to time. And you can't do that easily when you're using those dark notes, the sort of augmented fifth, the one that sort of makes it sound a bit like black magic, really. So
Yeah, so it's like a major scale, like, and then you got the minor scale. Can you play? See, that's both an A major and A minor. Can you play an A blues scale, both on top of that?
you can. Yeah, I think I use all of those interchangeably. What I probably would say is if you've got a dark chord like A minor, it's very difficult to play a major scale against that. But if you were playing a sort of a seventh, A7 instead of the minor as your starting point, you can play the blues scale against that. So if your progression is in not a particularly major or minor scale, just the root note, perhaps the A with the fifth and the octave without the notation that gives it major or minor, it becomes much easier then to use the major and minor scales interchangeably. But you've got a sort of House of the Rising Sun, Californication type start to this in A minor. You can't. It's difficult to play A major against that. So if you want to interchange scales, you need to play A natural really, or use a thing like a seventh where you can sort of get away with the blues scale and the major one. I demonstrate I'm not near a guitar, so
What I find a bit challenging is that when I'm doing like a solo, and I do quite a lot of soloing, believe it or not, in Ukraine when in church services, like they kind of let me play this electric guitar, and I like a little bit of because I don't really speak I don't speak Ukrainians, but like sometimes I will play a solo of quite an emotional song, and I find that if I just go with the notes of the scale, like an A major, A minor solo, then I'm not worrying too much about the other notes. But if I'm trying to make a solo on top of a chord progression, it's kind of tricky to remember what note you can't play on, say, a scale. So, say on a A, let's just say C major. If you want to play like an F as part of the solo that's on F major, you have to remember not to play the fourth. Then you're thinking too much about not playing that fourth on the F scale.
I think a bit of overthinking can come into that. But the escape route is not to signify the chords with a major or minor in the first place. So if you play A minor, you really have to play in a minor scale most of the time, or at least then the sort of Dorian and other things. But if you don't add that minor signifier in, you can fiddle around all over places. A good example of this would be some of the work done by one of my idols, Bill Nelson, where he works in a sort of A ninth scale. So he's got the A shape on the bottom note, but with the B open. So that, whereas A minor would have this C note on the B, wouldn't it? You'd have the extra one fret up. You'd be playing the C on the B note.
So if I play the A minor power chord like this,
Yeah.
ninth basically means I'm playing an extra B as well as that.
Well, if you go to if you pretended you were in the police right now, not the Metropolitan Police, but the police,
Yeah.
and you play an A chord at the bottom of your guitar.
Okay.
Let's play me an A. Yeah, right. So if you played that A chord, but you took your probably this finger off, yeah, that's it. If you played that, you then sound like the police, don't you?
Well, that's
Really?
A2, right?
Yeah. It's an A with an extra B in it.
Yeah.
So instead, if you played the first note, the first fret of that now, you'd have A minor. So instead of playing it that, if you played, there's your A minor. So if you took your first finger off now, you get. So if you played the A natural or A ninth, whatever you want to call it, just A, then it hasn't got any color in it, that chord. So the colors are provided by the solo. If you then say, I'll play a major progression over that, that will sound fine. And if you then also moved into minor, it would also sound fine because you haven't colored the chord in any way at all. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
And you can do the same with sort of the other chords as well. Sort of. So as soon as you signify that it's a minor, you are committing to playing in that kind of scale. And I perhaps in part two I'll demonstrate, but anyway, we got deep into that. But yeah, the way to avoid having to apologize is not to color the backing chord with major or minor. Then you actually open up the range of what you can do on top of it with almost no limits, really.
Not to color the backing chord. What does that mean again?
Well, the backing chord is sort of like a blank sheet, really. It's just the note A, its fifth, its octave with whatever you happen to throw alongside it. So that chord you played, you got an E, an A, another E, an A B, and an E is what it spells, and you've got therefore a B in it, which is notionally a ninth, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't say major or minor. It's A. So it's sort of like an A natural, really. It hasn't got any color to it. Therefore, if you then sort of went da, 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 whichever you think you did on it, it would be right. Whereas when you say I'm playing like the Hollies, a sort of an A major chord with a lot of major emphasis in it, and you try and put the blues scale over that, it sometimes will sound a bit odd because you've got the distance between the minor third and the major third going on, which is one note apart. So you get that sort of musical dissonance. Now you can use that to great effect, but nonetheless, it's technically it doesn't quite work. What doesn't work technically doesn't matter in some forms of music anyway. But that's why it will sort of clash, is because you've got two notes that are really pushing against one another, and you can see graphs in physics of how the first note of the scale, the zero note and the first note, if you play them together, they really clash. And this is why the sixth interval also clashes, because it has a high dissonance ratio. There are graphs online of this stuff to look at, all very interesting. But Black Sabbath thought, hey, that's our whole way of being, is to play these dark notes that summon up the devil. But there is clearly some physics involved in here that makes some notes appear to sound wrong.
There's quite a few YouTube channels that are doing really well with their interviewing musicians by musicians, like Jack and Justin Hawkins. There's one of them, and he's up 500,000 subscribers now or more. So you ever thought about doing something like that, just interviewing rock stars and musicians?
Well, I did do quite a bit of that on the Academy of Rock. There is a page called Music Dash Interviews on the Academy of Rock, and I've got Roberta Flack and Prince's band members and various other people. So I didn't particularly talk to them about music. I talked to them about what you could transfer in terms of life and other lessons from music to other walks of life. So I don't think I could do that kind of interview because I don't have sufficient technical knowledge. I mean, there's a few people out there really good at doing this. But actually, since you mentioned Justin Hawkins, The Darkness is a brilliant example of using both the minor and major scale across a sort of essentially a sort of a harmonic structure. So if you listen to some of their songs, I believe in a thing called Love, the solos interchange the major scale and the sort of traditional blues scale quite a bit. So they're doing that sort of stuff all the time, actually. My musical knowledge sort of stops there. So if I were to try and interview a jazz musician, I would just be sitting there going, I don't know what he's talking about. Eventually, I mean, I know enough, but not enough. I'm not Rick Beato, who does know everything about these things.
Well, you know more than
So,
me because like you're able to recognize all these interviews and talk about them. And I couldn't really just mention that from what I was playing.
but a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. I mean, Rick Beato can hold a conversation with any musician about any subject, and if they dive into a corner, he can go with them. I would be quite happy to let them go into the corner on their own and then bring them out when they'd finished. But so as a facilitator, I could hold that conversation. But yeah, it wouldn't be a marriage of experts, I think, for some. So I haven't tried to do that conversation because really I do parallel lessons from music and business. That's where I sit. So I'm interested in the sort of crossover between those disciplines. And other people do it really well, actually. So I'll leave them to it.
What do you think of Brendan Kavanagh and this thing with playing annoying the Chinese Communist Party? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. Tell me about it.
So Brendan Kavanagh has a YouTube channel, and what he was doing, he was playing this, I don't know what you call it, some kind of jazz music on the piano, boogie woogie, I think is called, right? And there were like people from the Chinese Communist Party in the background wanting to play the piano, and that at some point, I think they were kind of friendly at the start, and at some point they decided, or they didn't know that what they were doing was getting put on YouTube, so. So they started this whole thing that escalated really quickly, and at one point, one of the Chinese, I don't know, bodyguards or something like that, apparently works Financial Times, was like, "Don't touch her," because he was touching the Chinese Communist flag, and
yeah, I mean, I think this points to the power of music to overcome, memos and other things. That the reason that sort of totalitarian regimes ban or control what music can be played is it unleashes all sorts of feelings and difficult concepts, particularly music with lyrics and stuff. So as soon as you start going to Russia, playing Street Fighting Man, that might not go down so well in some parts of the world, because music isn't just a neutral thing. I mean, I suppose you can play your Chinese pentatonic music and think of water lilies, but as soon as you start applying lyrics to things, then people want to look at them. I mean, there have been all these examples of set lists have been reviewed in certain countries of whether they're suitable or not for the populace to listen to. And of course, it also breaks a lot of cultural norms. You start pointing at the flag, and meanwhile you're singing, "F your mum" or something. That's probably a problem. Unfortunately, I've not been in totalitarian states playing music recently.
how easy is it for someone like myself that wants to do more music to sort of transition into that, doing it sort of semi-professionally?
Well, I think I don't want to be. I think if you have drive, I think that the thing is everyone wants to play an instrument, but to then move up to be Robbie Williams or whoever, what's often it's not so much the technicalities of your music that matter, it's whether you really want to do it. And there's an awful lot of people that want to be musicians and do it. So it's a hugely upward climb from being a sort of able to play music to wanting to be recognized for it nationally or internationally. So, and I think it's actually incredibly difficult now because videos and other things have made it so easy. Well, no, they haven't made it easy for people to learn music, but it's become easier. So lots of people now can learn how to play an instrument quite well with a few video tutorials, whereas I had to slow the records down with my foot when I was learning and sort of play them backwards or slow them down to 33 instead of 45 to try and slow it all down. So videos do help you learn the techniques of music, but then we're left with what is it that you do to become in the music industry? And of course, this is one of the things we're going to discuss with Gina Miller. We're doing some events in a music shop at some point, and artists now can have zillions of YouTube sort of hits, and they get £54.23 from Spotify.
Yeah,
You know, they're
exactly.
hundreds of thousands of downloads. I have sold some music, and I can, if you see the report on CD Baby of how much per download it is or stream, it is 0.0000. It goes on for some time, and sometimes it's zero. So little that they record it as zero. So I did actually get £58 for a song. That's a hell of a lot of downloads. I mean,
Yeah,
that's doing quite well. But making money out of the music industry is now different. It's not any better or worse. It's different. And you have to conquer marketing, and of course all of that comes down at a personal level if you really want to do it. I'm not a great fan of Robbie Williams, but he's there because he wants to be. Lots of people want to be, but then they do all the hard work to make sure that that happens. I think that is incredibly difficult, actually. I'm not wishing to put you off here. I'm just trying to give you a realistic preview. But, finding your shtick, finding what you want to do, and then saying the world needs some of that is part of it. And then pushing through all the barriers when the record companies go, we don't want you, or, it's like J.K. Rowling. Had she not persisted with her Harry Potter, she wouldn't have been where she is now. And you get more rejections and acceptances. And that's really hard, I think, for people because musicians can be quite tender souls, which is why they often appoint a manager, because the manager is usually the person least able to play the music. Did I say that? And actually, no, that actually the roadie's often able to play the music but doesn't want to be on the stage. It's the manager probably can't play the instrument. It's a massive stereotype, but you know what I mean. So actually getting good management, if you're not, a lot of musicians say, I don't like all this rubbish music industry, but unfortunately you have to live with it unless you're lucky enough to be able to live without it. And even major artists have record labels and things now still. So the industry has got people, gripped really, and therefore you have to find ways to work with it. If you don't want to do it yourself, you find someone else to do it. But getting a good manager is really important. And the Rolling Stones aren't managed by someone who is the least good musician. I'm talking about, little bands that someone says, I'll be the manager. And it's because they can't play the instrument. Or they've got a van or some other asset. I'm being really horrible to music managers now. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to put the light on as well.
He's got a guitar. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll be here ready in case I feel the urge.
So, coming back on what we said, if we play sort of A minor, you're sort of in the mind of going things like, and that sort of minor scale. If you play,
that was a blues.
That was sort of bluesy, sort of minor scale. Where if you stay in that sort of neutral scale, you can sort of muck about in anything you like. Or you could do. That still works. All of that works on that sort of scale because it has no color. The backing chord has no color. Whereas if you add then you are in more or less doing your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do then.
My rubbish headphones are hardly picking up the high notes. I've got my Space Cadet headphones.
Okay, fine. So that was just backtracking on the point we were making earlier that if you play a blues sort of seventh, you can sort of jiggle around in the blues scale But you can also that's sort of more majorish. So you can do both on a sort of a blues type scale, which is usually based on a sort of major seventh or a seventh at least. But as soon as you go into that dark color of a minor, you really are, you can't suddenly go, that changes the major. That's your sort of shift from the minor third to the third, as it were. So, but of course, you can break all the rules. This is the whole point. You know, this is how Black Sabbath started on sort of the sixth interval and things like that. Anyway, where were we?
Yeah, so I'm talking about like getting into the music industry. So I I do just love playing on stage. For me, playing on a stage is much more different than just sitting at home practicing. And I want to do stuff on the stage much more than I'd rather just sit down on a YouTube channel and things like that. So at the moment, I do as much as I can in various churches, but obviously that's not an income generating thing. Well, some uh, musicians do make money in churches and that, but that's not a motivation. So I'm looking at maybe writing some songs, secular type songs. Maybe I'll probably write some worship songs as well. But I think I'm just enjoying the musical journey. I know I'm almost 40, and usually people are either retiring from music about this age, but I'm sort of reverse careering, almost wanting to
Well,
get into the music industry.
when I was 18, I wasn't very good in a punk band. I was in the band that I could be in, which was a punk band. But by the time I gotten good, of course, you don't want to be in a band because it's a young person's game. So you can find that you can learn more as you get older. I became really quite good probably around the sort of 35 to 45 mark. Um, I wasn't bad before, but I couldn't play sort of solos in quite the way I do now. So you can get better and better actually. Um, yeah, so that age needn't be a barrier actually.
Mm-hmm. I guess I just have to write some music and get it out there and see what people think of it. Put it on Steam or whatever it
Oh,
is, Spotify and
that's the
stuff.
that's the other thing to say that you'll learn much quicker by being in a band than sitting in your bedroom, sort of getting ready to play. I mean, you have to be ready with a band, even if you're not ready. So actually, that's one of the quicker ways to learn is to join a band. So yeah, absolutely, learning by doing really matters.
I sort of play in free bands because I'm always traveling. So I have a band that I rehearse with in Scotland, one in Vienna, which kind of varies every week because it's a church and there's quite a lot of people want to play. And then Ukraine, I played a band there. So I get sort of exposure to various cultures and instruments and venues as well. So the one in Ukraine is pretty much is in a large building. So that's so it's on a raised stage. There's the acoustics are great. The one in Scotland is basically a dungeon, and the one in
Mm.
Vienna is a sort of long rectangular building in there. But the one in Vienna is probably I get more coaching there because the people speak English, and they're quite the musicians there are quite advanced. Yeah, and I've got a few videos on my YouTube channel with ones in Scotland. So I mean, it's a journey. If I don't make any money from it, nothing lost. It's an enjoyable hobby. So
Mm. No, I'm currently writing a song for Scottish independence actually, and to make that work, I've put it in a sort of thematic chromatic scale, as if you're playing bagpipes and things like that, because some instruments draw you towards that style of that sort of approach. So
Scotland. What do you
yeah,
think of
so
Scotland?
we're very much doing the sort of big country sort of thing. That's very Celtic.
It seems the microphone seems to be picking up the lower notes more than the higher notes.
I'm sorry about that. You'll just have to watch me. But, very yeah, that's very Celtic. The thing you couldn't hear is very Celtic. It's your chromatic major scale, really, with a couple of notes missing.
I know. I wonder if I could rap a song with the Scottish independence. Scottish independence was a good idea, but then we realized we had no oil.
Yeah, in fact, the oil was stolen from you by David Cameron.
Yeah. We sold all our oil. We got the Barnett formula, but it was probably 40% less than we would have made if we keep the oil.
If you could ever get the Barnett formula into a rock song, I think you'd be a genius.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would rhyme with. Maybe Alf Garnett.
I was working
But
a I was working on a song actually called Generation Rent. And I sent the lyrics over to one of my producer friends in London, and he actually wants to produce it with me. So I need to
and did
get
you
it.
include the Barnett formula though?
No, let me just give you some of the lyrics. No, I won't give you all the lyrics in case somebody steals it, and makes a song. But
I
it was.
think it'd be better if you put the Barnett formula into a pop song.
Let me
Maybe that's
just
what you're talking about.
get the lyrics up. I'm not really gonna sing it. I'm just gonna say what it is. It's Yeah, I find that with music you have to really write things down, otherwise you forget them. If you got like any kind of lyrics or melody, it's like you have to just nail it.
Wait till you get to my age then.
So I sent him my first version of the lyrics, and then he sent me a sort of refined version. So the first verse goes like, "Oh, you're past your prime, you ain't got a dime, gotta work the field for supply on demand." And then the chorus goes something like, "Generation rent, take your riches to the grave. Seem the less you earn, the more you pay. My speculation, this is tribulation when there's nothing more than capitalization."
That's quite a good mouthful. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. I've written songs about economics before. It's a fairly badly trodden path, I have to say. But yeah, exploitation, capitalization is very good.
yeah.
So
You seem to have got like some new books in the last 3 years out there.
yeah, I turned away from writing business books. I wrote one on AI in 2018, long before Elon Musk got hold of it. I think he's wholly wrong about AI, really. AI, like every technique of progress we've ever adopted, is neutral until the robots actually do take over. AI is neutral, but what we do need is exceptionally good policymakers and leaders to make sure the rules we apply to AI are not themselves, dismissive of human capabilities. So more than ever before, we need good leadership, particularly in politics and world leaders, to make sure that the laws we apply to AI don't, turn us back to a pre-industrial age, really, because that way lies danger. So I set out a grid of opportunities, and the one I posited was the best opportunity was I called it the Man Machine after a Kraftwerk album. It should really have been properly titled the Man Stroke Woman Machine, but that wasn't the album title. So woman is implied as well in the thing. And it put forward a view that we must make use of what humans are good at, all those things that we're really good at, and we must profit from machinery as well where possible. None of this is terribly new. Opticians have been using machines for years. Lots of professions use a form of intelligence, not artificial nonetheless, but we augment our own abilities with machines. Nothing new in that. But of course, artificial intelligence does have the possibility of replacing jobs. So I think people are right to be concerned about it. But I think if we make good policies around it, we can do well with artificial intelligence. But there's where the rubber hits the road, because I don't think we've got brilliant world leaders who will make those policies. And Rishi Sunak has said we're open to be, for you to come and exploit AI in Britain because we're desperate to have something that we can claim as our own. So unless we have unified standards around the world for AI, we are in trouble. So I think the rubber hits the road with the leadership point, not the machines themselves. But yes, and if you're thinking of will I survive the AI age, I recommend you either become an undertaker or a hairdresser, because although you can cut someone's hair with a machine, people, it's a personal service. So I think personal services will always be popular, but some other professions will, of course, disappear. And if we're clever, we move up to doing higher level things. If we're not clever, then we probably are on the dole queue. That's the book in a nutshell. The other books I've written have really been about Brexit mostly, but that one's the last sort of business type book I wrote.
I think if it eliminates a lot of, or it improves the efficiency of jobs that have a lot of drudgery, manual processes, and as long as those people have,
Yeah,
can be retrained, I think that's going to be.
and that promise has been made ever since man began. I mean, when the ZX81 computer arrived and when the calculator arrived and the computer, the personal computer, everyone said it will free man and woman from slavery. In fact, what happens, we end up spending more time putting security codes into our computers. so, so in fact, it hasn't freed us yet. So, so we're almost addicted to the computer. So, but this may well take away substantial parts of the drudgery. So we have the opportunity to be free, but it raises other questions about how does one earn a living if there aren't so many jobs to go around? What do we do with ourselves? I mean, they are big questions, which the book does sort of deal with, but which politicians prefer not to at the moment, actually, by and large, because they are very big questions. And if you're going to be elected, you don't want to ask the nation very big questions. You want to talk about potholes and other things. And so, so there is the rub with this is we need better leadership in a world of machinery and AI. And we don't.
I'm finding that as a programmer, ChatGPT is pretty much a rubbish coder. It makes some things like refactoring code a little bit simpler. But when it comes to anything mid-level and more complicated, it doesn't have it. It just cannot compete with human beings.
No.
And it just imagines a lot of stuff, and you just can't use that code. You can basically take a file with some maybe some data in there and some variables and say, okay, add a new variable, make a new method. When it comes to like, okay, I want to use this new way of integrating with AWS and this database, and we want to have this automation feature and this testing thing, you put it in the ChatGPT, it just gives you a bunch of like steps on how you should go and find that stuff.
Well, it's like painting by numbers, I think is the easiest analogy. Yes, it
Yeah.
can analyze the entire catalogue of the Beatles recorded output. Can it write a good Beatles song? Well, it can approximate it, but it can't do that magical thing yet. And that may change, but it really can't do that accidental thing that makes something incredibly good that humans do so well from time to time. So it's all. I think the GPT Beatles album concert is a bit like KTEL Records in the 70s. They did sound a bit like Susie Quattro and Gary Glitter and Slade, but there were very poor copies of them. Or so perhaps the easiest way to think about that is go to a Dreadful Jam session, and you're going to hear all those songs played really badly.
I think a huge factor of AI being so crap in terms of art is that it doesn't have a soul. You can immediately spot when somebody has been lazy, like myself, and used ChatGPT to generate a thumbnail for whatever social media. It's obvious. It just the images are terrible. And I was talking to some studios, and I was trying to get some work with them to make some basically slide decks of like scenes and things like that, so that they could save some money on that and the cost of making some artwork for a movie. But there was just no way for the context from one image that DALL-E 3 makes to the next one. So say I had a character that's in a situation, you can get that image looking really good. Okay, you can refine it, and maybe as long as that isn't doing anything too complicated, you could sort of pass that off as sort of theme work art. But if you want to try and get a progression of that same character in a different scene, person looking the same, like, you've got no chance. I spent around 50 hours making YouTube videos, and there's no way to get like the context. It's okay for low bar work.
GPT wouldn't have produced Monty Python, probably wouldn't have produced The Office, perhaps not Bohemian Rhapsody. It's kind of like regression to the mean. If you think about the S curve, it sort of it'll it guesses what the Beatles were all about, and in the middle of it somewhere there is this mush which it can produce a song that sounds quite a lot like the Beatles, but doesn't have that spice that makes a great song. So it will regress a lot of things to the mean. So yes, if you ask it to write literature, or write a book that sounds a bit like Shakespeare, but it isn't stand out. It's a regression to the mean. Actually, it's a sort of a combination of everything, those devices that go into literature or anything else for that matter. So I've just thought of that from what you said, that actually regression to the mean is quite a good idea to think about what a robot will do. It will summarize, an experience, a typology, a piece of music, piece of art, and give you a version of Picasso, but it may not be the most out there version, I suppose. It might take one or two outliers and try to fit them in. And of course, then there lies the opportunity for making mistakes that aren't cool. It just puts things together that don't seem to quite work. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that a lot of sort of low skilled office jobs are going to be under risk when it comes to like blue collar work and those kind of jobs. I think those jobs are going to be more appreciated because people will start realizing that it's just impossible to get a robot to come into your house and fix some pipe or do some, because every home is different, and AI doesn't have a soul. It doesn't create stuff. It's basically pattern recognition, and you can't have a you can't you can't have like a pattern for everyone's unique situations in their home. So some robot could come and fix some random pipe that's completely different from every other setup that's ever existed.
The context specific knowledge you need to be a surgeon or to be a plumber are they're very different actually in each circumstance. I mean, there's no human body that's quite the same. So a surgeon has to do a lot of. I know this from papers I've read. Improvisation is very relevant to surgery. Yes, you've got a general map of what's inside. If you go into someone's arm or leg, you know what you're going to find there, but exactly where it is and the criticality of getting that right instead of getting it wrong, the laid down experience of the surgeon will probably tell them to use a hunch or try something. And of course, the technology will help them make less mistakes. But actually, the laid down experience of a good surgeon is a lot of it is about improvisation, not random improvisation, but kind of around a score, in this case, Grey's Anatomy and all their medical knowledge. But the improvisation comes from thinking, I can't fix that person quite the same as I did the last one. But if I go and do this here, that has got a high chance of working. So that would be the same in a lot of professions where there is a lot of context related knowledge. That's where the robot can assist, but maybe not yet do a better job or as good a job. I think it all depends what the profession is, actually.
And people have been studying AI, researchers have been working on AI at least 50 years. And I don't know why companies spend so much time trying to get these chatbots to work, because, or even things that can generate like bunches of paragraphs of text for canned responses. I mean, it's those canned responses that AI generates, they just sound so gaff and artificial. You can paste it into like zerogpt.com and it immediately tells you like 50% of it's written in ChatGPT. You immediately lose respect for that person. It's like, this person didn't bother to. I would rather have like a 2 sentence email from somebody than somebody who's copy pasted 500 words from ChatGPT as a response,
To give AI a bit of a boost here, just for balance, AI probably wouldn't have written the Frog Chorus by Paul McCartney, and that's a good thing. Nor would it have written Mull of Kintyre, which is another good thing. I'm revealing a personal dislike of Paul McCartney's more twee output here. I'm sorry, Paul McCartney, about that, but they are all hits and they've made him a fortune, so I can't complain. But I don't think Chat GPT would have produced Mull of Kintyre or the Frog Chorus. Just my view.
I think as we try and sort of replace our real relationship with AI, I think that'll give us an appreciation of what it's like to be human with their imperfections and character.
That
Because
that is the sweet spot, yes.
yeah,
But we may have to adapt as well and start to think that work is not the be all and end all. And actually, if a lot of people are at rest, the question becomes, I mean, this is why lots of people have thought about universal basic income. If everyone is at rest, how do they make a living? And how do they enjoy themselves? Because if you're at rest, you probably need more of that thing we call money to fill the space. So there's a massive problems coming over the hill for governments of thinking about people that aren't fully employed all the time. We might have to go back to thinking about being social animals at some level and helping one another and doing social work in the community rather than going to work earning a crust in order to go on holiday and spend our money. That's a huge upheaval for people, and I don't think anyone's quite ready for that yet.
I think UBI is quite a scary thing because you're completely dependent on suckling at the bosom of the government, and if they don't
You're,
want to fund you for
yeah.
whatever reason, it's like throwing you in jail because then you have to like go out in the streets and beg for food. So that's like, I'm sure there's countries that would do that to you if they didn't like what you were doing.
That's why I said it rather depends on having excellent leadership, um, and it won't be the same for all people, I think. So we really do need better leaders in the world in this fifth sort of industrial age, as it were. Fourth industrial age, sorry, I haven't gotten to the fifth one yet. I'll be extinct by that time.
So what's new on Peter's horizon?
What's new? I was going to go back to work this year, and then I broke my collarbone. That's another story. That's bike colliding with a brick on a pavement, but never mind. That didn't stop me going back to work or start me. But I was going to go back to work at the age of 65 and start going around the world again because I'd stopped during COVID. The last job I had was with the gold mining company. I did some keynotes and then some consultancy for them. Very enjoyable, really nice people, really difficult job they do. I mean, mining is really hard and difficult and dangerous if you don't do it well, because most of the gold that was on the surface of the planet is now not there. It's all been mined, so you have to go down further and further, and that presents particular problems for using people well and looking after them. So, of course, machinery is of interest to most mining companies at the moment. So I was going to go back to doing some consultancy and sort of events. And then Gina Miller's asked me to be a campaign manager for Epsom in this country. And I'd urge people to have a look at the True and Fair Party on Google. It's easy to find. And what she's putting forward is a radical vision to improve politics, to clean up politics. It needs more than one broom, however. So, and possibly a vacuum cleaner as well. But I mean, she's got a very good vision and very clear thinking on cleaning up politics. And she's going to stand in a few constituencies around the country in the general election. And hopefully we're going to win some of them. That's quite an uphill struggle because people sit in a binary system and they think I can only do X or Y. Well, there's something else. And I think we're something else. And so I'm trying to help her to find out how high is high where she is in Epsom and with the other people in the other constituencies. It's very exciting. She wants to reform our democracy and not have jobs for the boys. These are radical changes and reform, various aspects of the way that the system works rather than just carrying on with the system. So to make it match fit for this sort of fourth industrial age, perhaps, but also to turn back some of the bad decisions we've made on Brexit and other things like that. So it's not just about Brexit, it's about reforming democracy. But it's a thrill to work with Gina. She's a hard taskmaster to work for. She's very demanding, and that's good. But she's also very clear. She's all the things that you want in a leader that we don't have in Westminster. So, and people say to me, won't she spoil Labour's vote? No, because she's only standing in a few constituencies. So it's not going to bring the House down. Well, what can one person do? Well, there was Caroline Lucas once who did a lot for the environmental movement from the position of one person. And then there's that other git, Nigel Farage, who wasn't even elected and got us Brexit. So one person can change the world, actually. And Gina is that person. So I'm very proud to be doing that. It's, you know, baptism of fire at 65. You have to work like a Trojan. And it's very good, though. So I really enjoy it.
Why did people in the UK put up with this binary system where you don't have a second, third, or fourth choice, and that people don't end up voting for these alternative parties because they just think that their vote actually won't do anything because the other Labour and Conservatives will get
I
like.
don't think it's necessarily just a UK problem, but I do think that both parties tacitly agree that it's best to keep things in that sort of duopoly because they both are invested in the prisoner's dilemma that if they widen it to three people, they might lose. So oddly enough, they sort of collude in various non-obvious ways to preserve the binary system. So, and of course, our newspapers tell people it's red or blue, and so on and so forth. I mean, the trouble is, you do get better, you get more diversity and more plurality from politics that isn't binary. But having traveled widely, 10, 15 years ago, I went to Romania. The taxi driver there said to me, we've got 30 parties. Nobody knows what to do at all. So you can become sort of confused, completely confused, if you end up with 30 parties to vote for. So yeah, of course, nobody has ultimate power. But we've always told people it's best to have a strong government. But yet in Europe, they've managed with coalitions for many, many decades. Coalitions mean that people have to battle out ideas and come to the highest possible outcome rather than the lowest common denominator. I think if you look at how committees work, sometimes they compromise so badly that nobody's happy at the end of that. But actually, if you do proper dialogue, you can reach a good solution that serves the communities you serve. So I think we have to work harder on dialogue in coalitions and other forms of government. But nonetheless, the result might be better than just, you know, constantly seeking compromises. But that is the system we seem to have. And the Punch and Judy politics that goes with it doesn't serve anyone terribly well. But hey ho, who knows what will happen? But Gina's one of a few people that have the integrity, genuinely the integrity to change that. Actually,
So, what is it about her leadership you think is better than any of the other leaders in the UK? And what was the name of her party again?
oh, it's the True and Fair Party. It's well, she's honest. It actually does what it says on the tin. People say to me, "What a stupid name, the True and Fair Party," and I point out, I said, "Wouldn't you like politicians to tell the truth?" And they go, "Yes." I said, "There's the true bit then." And wouldn't you like it to be fair-minded in terms of trying to serve the communities rather than serving themselves? And they go, "Yes, I'd like that as well." I said, "There it is." And if you start taking issue with words, then of course the Labour Party, no one's digging coal in this country anymore. You know, it's based on an illusion that Labour is hard labour, I think. Whereas someone that's actually at work these days may be working with a keyboard, and there is a popular misconception that work is stuff you do with your hands. That is the case, but it's also stuff you do with your brains. And the Labour Party is still in a sort of illusion that somehow it's for the workers. But the working class are people that work, in my view, whether it's with data, whether it's with, you know, digging stuff out the ground, whether it's a plumber, whatever it is. The Conservative party doesn't conserve anything. So we can always take a pot shot at any name quite easily. And the Liberal Democrats, well, I won't go there, but I've met a lot of Liberal Democrats, and they're not always what it says on the tin. So True and Fair is about truth, transparency, and being fair-minded in politics. And I think that actually is something we did have once. And somehow the good chat model that we had in the 1960s, where people did the right thing, somehow has been polluted by moral hazard and greed and other problems. And I think that's what Jim is up to doing, is to re-establish decency in politics, to have a proper constitution, to have rules. If you don't turn up for your job for 2 years, like we have in Northern Ireland, you get fired. You know, I know of no profession where you could not go to work for 2 years and carry on drawing your salary. So there's lots of rights that need to be wrong. So it's not left or right; it's right or wrong. To give you another sort of catchphrase for what she's about. Um, that's probably enough for now, but that's what it's really about.
I'd like a UK party that reduces the size of government and promotes
Yes.
communities getting together to solve problems more than just outsourcing everything to specialized agencies. Because,
Well,
like in
yeah.
Ukraine, what's one of the strengthening parts of Ukraine is that there was a strong community spirit, and so when there's war broke out, people already knew and were used to helping each other. Instead of here in the
Mm.
UK and Austria, in a sense, you don't even know who your neighbors are because it's just everything's outsourced to the government, big government, you know.
Well, I do know who my neighbours are, which is unusual in the south. But I take your point. Actually, a lot of people don't either know or care who their neighbours are. That's one of the things that we've lost in a sense of community. But in terms of answering your point, citizens' assemblies are part of Gina's mix. Reducing the House of Commons to the number of seats that exist in the House of Commons is a waypoint. It's not the final destination, but there are 400 chairs and there are 800 people. And she's saying, well, perhaps we should just have the same number of people as there are seats, chairs, I mean, as a starting point to get it down from sort of the old boy network and promoting Boris Johnson promoting members of his family in into the House of Lords and stuff like that. So there's lots about parliamentary reform, and so it isn't just about Brexit or other bits of democracy. It's citizen democracy. It's parliamentary reform as well.
It was an interesting thing that some of my friends were involved with. I'm not sure if it's still part of it, but they had their own currency in Kingston where they exchanged a pound for the Kingston pound. And this Kingston pound could only be spent in Kingston. And they were great as well. They were organising food banks at the churches a lot. Um, but that's,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
localism has other everything has an up and a downside, but localism has certain difficulties, doesn't it? Because you can't leave the area. But you can get round some of those problems as well. So you have to think it all through because people do travel. It's not like they live in a global village on their own. So yeah, but there are people, of course, particularly the sort of some of the more radical parties on the right that want to have more localism. That's fine. Sense of community comes out of that, but also we are connected to the world, so we have to think about that as well.
Cool. Well, Peter, I think that's a good place to end it today. But anything you want to leave us with today for the next time we come on?
Uh, I never meant to cause you any sorrow. Purple Rain. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been a extremely wide conversation between us, and the second part more of a conversation than a Q&A, really. So I've really enjoyed that actually.
I'm looking forward to seeing what this work of yours looks like, and please keep us up to date. And yeah, make more YouTube content. I love your channel.
Yeah, I've stopped doing that because there's no time, but I have made some videos for Gina recently, which will be out soon.
You should definitely
Those
try
are-
doing a podcast, man. I think you got that. You've got the voice for it and the character for it.
Oh, okay. That's another thing I'll add to the list then.
I mean,
Noted.
it's a good excuse to sit down with your mates and just I think a podcast is quite hard because the production value has to go up so much nowadays, and you have to capture everyone's attention within the first like 5 seconds. You need to like have all these things flashing around the screen and all the highlights is so people sit down and watch the whole episode. You know,
I don't think that doesn't sound like me. I'm saying I probably couldn't do that then, but you never know. If you're saying you think I could, then fine. Um, but yeah, it isn't on my radar right now. I'm working every hour that God sent doing this for Gina, so perhaps too many hours. So perhaps when I've got a bit more space, then in that case.
all right, Peter. Well, thanks for your time and thanks everybody for watching the podcast today or listening.
Thank you so much.